Part 1. The Impossible Arrival. The Galactic Empire had ruled the stars for 12,000 years. Their ships filled the void between worlds like clouds of metal and fire. They had conquered 10,000 planets and enslaved hundreds of species. No one had ever challenged them. No one had ever dared. They believed they were the masters of creation, chosen by the universe itself to rule over all lesser beings. They had forgotten what it meant to fear. That changed on the morning of the Imperial celebration, when every sensor in the capital system screamed a warning that made no sense. Admiral stood on the command deck of his flagship, the Eternal Dominion. He was old his scales faded to a pale blue, but his mind was still sharp. He had crushed rebellions and burned worlds. He had never lost a battle. But when he looked at the sensor display, he felt something he had not felt in centuries. He felt confused. A ship had appeared in the heart of the system. It had not come through hyperspace. It had not used any known form of faster-than-light travel. One moment there was empty space. The next moment there was a ship. It was as if the universe had simply decided to place it there. "What is that?" demanded. "Where did it come from?" His officers had no answer. They checked their instruments again and again. The readings were impossible. The ship was real, solid, and completely unknown. It matched nothing in their databases. Its design was alien in every way. Angular where ships were curved, dark where theirs were bright, small where theirs were massive, but there was something about it that made uneasy. It looked dangerous. It looked like it was built for war. 40,000 light-years away, this same ship had been floating in Earth's orbit just moments before. The USS Resolute was humanity's most advanced warship, a vessel built in secret by the United Defense Coalition. It carried experimental technology that no other nation on Earth even knew existed. The fold space drive was supposed to bend the fabric of reality, allowing the ship to travel instantly between 2 points. The test was supposed to send them to Mars. Captain Jake gripped the arms of his command chair as the universe twisted around them. Colors that had no names flashed across the sound became light. Light became pressure. And then everything snapped back to normal, and they were somewhere else entirely. "Report," Jake said. His voice was calm, but his heart was racing. Lieutenant at the navigation console was the first to speak. Her fingers moved across her instruments with growing panic. "Captain, I don't know where we are. These stars don't match any chart we have. We're not in the solar system. We're not even close." Commander Hill, the executive officer, stood beside the captain. He was a tall man with steady eyes and a voice that never wavered. "How far off course are we?" Looked at him with an expression that mixed fear with disbelief. "Sir, based on the star patterns, we're approximately 40,000 light-years from Earth. We're on the other side of the galaxy." The bridge went silent. Everyone understood what that meant. Even at the speed of light, it would take 40,000 years to get home. They were lost in a way that no human had ever been lost before. Jake stood up slowly. He walked to the and looked at the stars. Somewhere out there was Earth. Somewhere out there was home. But right now they had a more immediate problem. The sensors were showing thousands of contacts around them. Ships. Alien ships. More ships than humanity had ever built in its entire history. "We have company," said Lieutenant Commander Park from the tactical station. He was young but brilliant, recruited straight from the Naval Academy for his skill with weapons systems. "I'm counting over 3,000 vessels in close proximity, and Captain, they're all turning toward us." Chief Engineer Sam called up from engineering through the intercom. His voice crackled with static and worry. "Captain, the fold drive is completely drained. It needs at least 6 hours to recharge. Whatever we do, we're doing it here." Jake nodded slowly. 6 hours. They had to survive 6 hours surrounded by an alien fleet. He looked at his crew. These were good people, smart people. They had trained for combat, but nothing like this. No one had trained for this. Dr. Cole, the ship's linguist, suddenly spoke up from her station. "Captain, we're being hailed. Multiple frequencies, multiple formats. They're trying to communicate. Can you understand them? Shook her head. Not yet, but I'm working on it. The computer is analyzing the patterns. Give me time. Time, that was the one thing they might not have. On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral made his decision. This unknown ship was small, alone, and clearly lost. It would be captured, studied, and its crew would be processed like all other inferior species. The Empire had protocols for this. They had done it thousands of times before. Surround the vessel, he commanded. Prepare boarding parties. I want that ship intact and its crew alive for questioning. His fleet moved with practiced precision. Hundreds of warships closed in on the Resolute like predators circling wounded prey. Each ship was 10 times the size of the human vessel. Their weapons were charged. Their crews were confident. This would be easy. But Admiral made a mistake that day. A mistake that every species who had ever underestimated humanity had made. He looked at the small ship and saw weakness. He saw prey. On the bridge of the Resolute, Jake watched the alien fleet surround them. He saw the massive warships, the countless guns, the overwhelming force. Any logical analysis said they were doomed. Any computer would calculate their survival chances as zero. But Jake was human, and humans had never been good at accepting the impossible. They had crawled out of caves and conquered a planet. They had split the atom and walked on the moon. They had built a ship that could fold space itself. And they had done all of this because somewhere deep in their nature was a simple refusal to give up. All hands, Jake said over the intercom, his voice reaching every corner of the ship. This is the captain. We are 40,000 light-years from home, surrounded by unknown hostile forces. Our drive needs 6 hours to recharge. I won't lie to you. This is bad, but we are the crew of the Resolute. We are the best humanity has to offer. And I promise you this, we are going home. All of us, together. Now get to your stations and be ready for anything. In that moment, surrounded by an alien empire that had never known defeat, humanity prepared to make its introduction to the galaxy. It would be an introduction that no one would ever forget. Part 2. First contact gone wrong. The Empire had a simple way of dealing with new species. When they found an unknown civilization, they gave them 2 choices. The first choice was to surrender completely. The species would be studied, classified, and assigned a role in the Empire. Some became workers, some became soldiers, some became something worse. The second choice was death. In 12,000 years, every species had chosen surrender. Death was absolute. Surrender at least meant survival. High Commander sat in his chamber aboard the Eternal Dominion, preparing the message that would be sent to the unknown ship. He was the voice of the Emperor in military matters, and his word was law. He did not hurry. He did not worry. This was routine. This small vessel would submit like all the others. The message was transmitted on every frequency that could generate. It was sent in mathematical patterns designed to be universal. It contained images showing the power of the Empire. It showed fleets. It showed conquered worlds. It showed species kneeling before masters. And it ended with a simple demand: surrender within 1 solar cycle or be destroyed. On the Resolute, Dr. Cole worked without rest to decode the alien transmission. She was a small woman with tired eyes and a brilliant mind. Languages were her gift. She had learned 12 human languages before the age of 20, but this was different. This was truly alien. The patterns made no sense at first. Then slowly, piece by piece, she began to understand. When she finally decoded the message, she wished she hadn't. "Captain," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, "I understand what they're saying." She paused, struggling to find the words. "They want us to surrender. They want to take the ship. They want to study us and classify us as a servitor species, a slave species." The bridge went cold. Every officer stopped what they were doing. They looked then at the captain. Jake stood very still. He thought about Earth. He thought about his family. He thought about everything humanity had built and dreamed and hoped for. And he thought about what it would mean to surrender, to become slaves. to let everything humanity stood for die in this distant corner of space. "No," he said simply. Commander Hill stepped closer to the captain. "Jake, there are thousands of ships out there. We have one. The math doesn't work." "The math never works," Jake replied. "It didn't work at Thermopylae. It didn't work at the Alamo. It didn't work 100 times in human history when people stood against impossible odds. But they stood anyway, because some things matter more than math." Chief Engineer Sam called up from engineering. "Captain, I've been scanning their ships. I have something you should hear." "Go ahead, Sam." "Their technology is advanced, but it's old, really old. I'm talking thousands of years without significant development. Their power systems are inefficient. Their weapons are slow. Their shields are designed against energy weapons, not kinetic impacts." Sam paused. "Captain, they built an empire and then stopped trying to improve. They got comfortable." Lieutenant Commander Park added his own analysis. "Their ships are massive, but that's a weakness too. Big targets, slow to turn, slow to react. Our point defense systems could track and destroy their weapons before they reach us, at least for a while." Jake felt something he hadn't felt since the jump. Hope, small and fragile but real. "How long is their solar cycle?" he asked. "Based on the data, approximately 14 Earth hours." 14 hours. The fold drive needed 6 hours to recharge. If they could survive the deadline and the attack that would follow, they might have a chance. Jake said, "I want a full tactical analysis. Every weapon we have, every trick we know. We're going to need all of it." "Already working on it, sir." The hours passed slowly. The crew prepared for battle in 1,000 small ways. They checked systems. They loaded ammunition. They said quiet prayers to whatever gods they believed in. Some wrote messages to families they might never see again, storing them in the ship's computer with instructions to transmit them if the Resolute ever made it home. When the deadline came, nothing happened at first. The fleet held position, waiting. Perhaps they expected the humans to change their minds at the last moment. Perhaps they were giving them one final chance. On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral watched the small alien ship with growing irritation. No species had ever refused surrender. It was unthinkable, insulting. This tiny vessel with its strange crew was defying the greatest empire in galactic history. It was almost amusing. "They have not responded to the ultimatum," High Commander reported. "They remain at battle readiness." "Then they have chosen death," said. There was no emotion in his voice. This was simply procedure. All ships open fire. The void lit up with plasma. Hundreds of weapons discharged at once, sending burning energy toward the Resolute. It was enough firepower to crack a planet. It should have been instant death. On the Resolute's bridge, Park's hands flew across his console. Incoming fire, multiple vectors, point defense engaging now. The ship came alive with violence. Hidden in the hull spun up and fired, sending streams of tungsten rounds into space at impossible speeds. The rounds were tiny, barely larger than fingers, but they moved at a fraction of light speed, carrying more energy than any explosive. The plasma torpedoes began to die. One by one, then by the dozen, they were shredded by the kinetic barrage. Explosions filled the space around the Resolute, but none of them touched the hull. The alien weapons, so terrifying in appearance, were too slow. They could not dodge. They could not adapt. Admiral watched in disbelief as his fleet's opening salvo was destroyed completely. Not a single weapon reached the target. His tactical officers were shouting, trying to make sense of what they were seeing. This was impossible. This was wrong. "What kind of weapons are they using?" he demanded. No one had an answer. They had fought with plasma and energy for thousands of years. They had never conceived of using simple kinetic force as a primary weapon. It was primitive. It was beneath them. It was devastatingly effective. "Return fire," Jake ordered. "Target the nearest destroyers. Kinetic missiles full spread." The Resolute's missile bays opened. Unlike the point defense rounds, these weapons were large. They carried no explosives, no warheads in the traditional sense. They were simply tungsten rods with engines attached, designed to accelerate to relativistic speeds and strike with the force of nuclear weapons. 3 missiles launched, 3 destroyers died. The impacts were so fast, so powerful, that the ship simply ceased to exist. One moment they were there. The next moment they were expanding clouds of debris and fire. For the first time in 12,000 years, the Empire understood fear. They had poked what they thought was a wounded animal. They had found something else entirely, something that refused to be prey. On the bridge of the Resolute, Jake watched the destruction with no satisfaction. These were lives being ended. Alien lives, yes, but lives nonetheless. He had not come to this distant place to kill. He had come by accident, thrown across the galaxy by technology he barely understood. But they had made their choice. They had demanded slavery or death, and humanity had given its answer. "Sam," Jake called to engineering, "how long on that drive?" 5 hours, 43 minutes, Captain." Jake looked at the thousands of remaining ships, at the Empire that was just beginning to understand what it faced. "Then we hold for 5 hours and 43 minutes, not 1 second longer, and anyone who tries to stop us is going to learn the same lesson those destroyers just learned." The battle for survival had begun. Part 3. The Doctrine of Overwhelming Response. The first hour of battle taught the Empire a truth they had forgotten long ago. Power was not about size. Power was not about numbers. Power was about will and innovation and the refusal to accept defeat. The small human ship danced through their formations like a blade, striking and vanishing, killing and surviving. Admiral had never experienced anything like it. His fleet outnumbered the enemy by more than 3,000 to 1. His ships were larger, his crews more numerous, his experience spanning centuries. Yet the alien vessel continued to fight, continued to win. Every tactic he tried failed. Every trap he set was avoided. Every weapon he fired was destroyed before it could strike. "How is this possible?" he demanded of his tactical officers. "They are one ship, one ship." The answer was something they could not understand. The Resolute had been built by a species that had spent its entire existence at war with itself. Humans had fought humans for thousands of years. They had developed weapons of terrible power. They had created strategies of beautiful complexity. They had learned, through blood and pain and endless conflict, how to survive against any odds. Captain Jake understood this heritage. He did not celebrate it, but he used it. "Evasive pattern Gamma," he ordered. "Target their command ships. Cut off the head and the body will stumble." Lieutenant Commander Park nodded grimly. His tactical display showed the battle in 3 dimensions, enemy ships marked in red, their own vessel a lonely blue dot in a sea of crimson. "I've identified their command structure. The largest ships are giving orders. If we take them out, the smaller vessels will lose coordination." "Do it." The Resolute turned toward the command vessels. Its engines burned bright, pushing the ship through maneuvers that should have torn it apart. The internal dampeners struggled to keep the crew from being crushed against the walls, but the ship held. The crew held. 3 kinetic missiles streaked toward a battlecruiser. The alien ship tried to move, tried to bring its shields to full power, tried to do something. But the missiles were too fast. They crossed the distance in seconds and struck with the force of small stars. The battlecruiser split in half. Its reactor lost containment and added to the destruction. Debris scattered in all directions, striking nearby vessels and causing secondary damage. In one attack, the Resolute had killed a battlecruiser and damaged 4 escort vessels. On the Eternal Dominion, Admiral felt something he had not felt since he was young. He felt mortal. "All ships maintain distance," he ordered. "Do not engage directly. Surround them, contain them. We will wear them down through attrition." It was a reasonable strategy. The Resolute was one ship with limited ammunition. The Empire had thousands of ships with endless resources. Time was on the side, or so believed. In the engineering section of the Resolute, Chief Engineer Sam worked miracles. His hands were burned from hot conduits. His uniform was stained with coolant. He had not slept since the jump, and he would not sleep until they were safe. Around him, his team fought to keep the ship alive. "Power coupling 3 is failing," reported Ensign Lisa, one of his assistants. "If it goes, we lose the port." "Then it doesn't go," Sam replied. He grabbed a welding tool and climbed into the maintenance shaft himself. The space was cramped and hot, filled with sparks and the smell of burning metal. He found the coupling and began repairs that should have taken an hour. He finished in 15 minutes. On the bridge, Jake watched the tactical display change. They were pulling back, forming a sphere around the Resolute. They were not attacking directly anymore. They were waiting. "They're trying to trap us," Commander Hill observed. "Wear us down, wait for us to run out of ammunition." "How many missiles do we have left?" Jake asked. Checked his inventory. 47 kinetic missiles, 12,000 rounds for point defense. At current consumption rates, we have approximately 3 hours of sustained combat. 3 hours. The fold drive needed 4 more hours to charge. They would run out of weapons before they could escape. Lieutenant spoke up from navigation. "Captain, I've been studying their formation. There's a gap, small but real, on their far side near the asteroid field. If we can reach it, we might be able to hide, buy time." Jake studied the display. The gap was there, barely visible. It would require flying through the heart of the enemy fleet. It would require perfect timing and impossible luck. It was their only chance. "All hands prepare for high-speed run. Plot the course. I want every weapon we have ready to fire. We're going through them, not around them." The Resolute's engines roared to full power. The ship accelerated toward the enemy fleet at speeds that made the sensors struggle to track. This was not the behavior of prey. This was the behavior of a predator. Admiral watched in disbelief as the alien ship charged directly at his fleet. "They're insane. They're attacking 3,000 ships with one vessel." But it was not an attack. It was a breakthrough. The Resolute entered the formation like a bullet, fired in all directions, creating a bubble of death around the ship. Any vessel that came too close was shredded by kinetic fire. Any weapon that was launched was destroyed before it could arm. Jake stood at the center of the chaos, calling out orders with mechanical precision. "Target that cruiser. Evasive starboard. Increase point defense to Sector 7. Steady, everyone, steady." The ship shook as near misses exploded against its shields. Alarms screamed warnings about hull stress and power fluctuations. A console exploded on the bridge, sending sparks across the room. But no one panicked. No one ran. Dr. Cole, who had never trained for combat, found herself helping a wounded officer to the medical bay. Her hands were shaking, but she did not stop. She could not stop. None of them could stop. The gap in the formation grew closer. 1 kilometer, 500 meters, 100 meters. "We're through," shouted. "Asteroid field in 30 seconds." The Resolute burst out of the enemy formation and plunged into the asteroid field. Rocks the size of buildings tumbled around them. Hands danced across her controls, guiding the ship through the maze with skill born from years of training and natural talent. Behind them, the fleet tried to follow, but their large ships could not navigate the asteroids. They crashed into rocks. They collided with each other. They fell into chaos. "Find us a place to hide," Jake ordered. "Sam, how much time do we have on the drive?" 3 hours, 42 minutes. Jake allowed himself a small breath of relief. They had bought time, not much but enough. As the Resolute settled into a crater on a large asteroid, invisible to enemy sensors, the crew finally had a moment to rest. They had survived the impossible. They had faced an empire and refused to break. But Jake knew this was not over. They would regroup. They would find new tactics. They would come again. And when they did, the Resolute would have to be ready. He looked at his crew, exhausted and battered but unbroken. These were humans. This was what humans did. They faced the darkness and refused to look away. They fought against odds that should have crushed them. They survived. 3 hours, he said quietly, then we go home. Outside, the Empire was already gathering its forces for the next assault. They had learned that the humans were dangerous. They had not yet learned that the humans were also stubborn, creative, and absolutely unwilling to die. That lesson was still coming. Part 4, The Chase Across Empire Space. The fold drive activated with a sound like reality tearing itself apart. One moment the Resolute was hiding in an asteroid field, surrounded by a fleet that was closing in for the kill. The next moment they were somewhere else, somewhere far away, in a system that had never seen a human ship. Captain Jake looked at and felt hope for the first time since this nightmare began. Stars he did not recognize, planets he had never seen, but no enemy ships, no weapons fire, just silence in space. "Where are we?" he asked. Lieutenant checked her navigation data. Approximately 200 light-years from the capital system. We're still deep in territory, but we've bought ourselves some distance. How long until they find us? Unknown, Captain, but based on their technology, I'd estimate we have a few hours at most. They'll have ships throughout their empire. Once word spreads about what happened, they'll be looking for us everywhere. Jake nodded slowly. A few hours was not much, but it was something. "Sam, how's the drive?" Chief Engineer Sam's voice came through the intercom, tired but steady. "Drained again. Needs another 6 hours minimum. And Captain, the power systems took damage during the battle. I can keep the drive functional, but it's going to be rough." 6 hours, then another jump, then another 6 hours. That was how they would get home. Jump by jump, hour by hour, crossing 40,000 light-years of hostile space. "We can do this," Jake said, as much to himself as to his crew. "One jump at a time." But the journey proved far harder than anyone expected. The Empire was vast, and it was angry. Word of the battle at the capital spread across every communication network. A single alien ship had destroyed dozens of Imperial vessels and humiliated the fleet. The Emperor himself issued a decree. The human ship must be captured or destroyed. No other priority mattered. The Resolute ran. For 3 weeks, they jumped from system to system, hiding in asteroid fields and gas clouds and empty space. They fought 17 engagements against forces that found them through luck or skill or sheer numbers. They destroyed 42 enemy vessels and lost count of how many close calls they survived. The crew grew exhausted. They slept in shifts, never more than a few hours at a time. They ate emergency rations because there was no time for proper meals. They fixed damage with whatever materials they could find, cannibalizing unused systems to repair essential ones. They became thin and tired and ragged. But they did not break. They did not surrender. They kept going. During a brief rest in an empty system, something happened that changed everything. Dr. Cole had been monitoring communications throughout the journey, trying to gather intelligence. Most of it was military chatter about the hunt for the Resolute. But one day, she found something different. She called a meeting of the senior staff in the captain's ready room. Her face was serious, but there was something else there too, something like excitement. "I've been analyzing intercepted communications," she began. "Not just military signals, but civilian ones too. Social networks, personal messages, news broadcasts. And I've discovered something important." She activated a holographic display. It showed a map of the Empire, thousands of star systems connected by trade routes and military corridors. But scattered throughout the map were red marks, hundreds of them. "These are rebellion indicators," explained. "Protests, sabotage, open resistance. The Empire isn't just cruel, it's dying. Their technology has stagnated for thousands of years. Their economy is built on slave labor. Their subject species are angry and desperate and waiting for something to change. Commander Hill studied the map, and we're that something. Exactly. News of our battle at the capital has spread everywhere. We killed warships. We escaped their entire fleet. To the enslaved species of this empire, we're proof that they can be beaten. We're a symbol. Lieutenant Commander Park leaned forward. So what are you suggesting? That we start a revolution? I'm suggesting that a revolution is already starting, because of us. And if we help it, if we show these people how to fight, we might not just escape this empire. We might destroy it. Jake was quiet for a long moment. He thought about his mission, which was simply to test the fold drive and return home. He thought about his crew, who had already given everything they had. He thought about the thousands of species suffering under rule, species who had never known freedom. We're not soldiers of fortune, he said finally. We're not here to overthrow empires. Our mission is to get home. Yes, sir, agreed. But we can do both. Every system we pass through, we can leave something behind. Information about our weapons, our tactics, our technology. Nothing complete, nothing that could threaten Earth if it fell into the wrong hands, but enough to give these people a chance. Lieutenant Torres, the security chief, spoke up. Captain, I've been thinking about this too. Every time we run, we're just reacting. But if we give them something else to worry about, rebellions throughout their empire, they'll have to split their forces. Fewer ships chasing us means better odds for us. Jake looked around the room. His crew, his family. They had been through hell together and they were still willing to fight, not just for themselves but for strangers they had never met. All right, he said. We keep running, we keep surviving. But along the way, we teach anyone who wants to learn. We show them that they are not gods. We show them how to fight. The next 2 weeks changed the shape of the galaxy. The Resolute continued its desperate flight toward the edge of the Empire, but now it stopped at inhabited systems along the way. Jake made contact with resistance leaders, sharing tactical information and weapons designs. Sam taught alien engineers how to build kinetic weapons. Cole helped different species communicate with each other, building the foundations of an alliance. At a space station orbiting a mining planet, they met representatives of an insect-like species that had been enslaved for 8,000 years. There were brilliant engineers who had been forced to build ships for their masters. Now they would build ships for themselves. In a hidden base inside a gas giant, they found the amphibious beings who had once ruled 100 worlds before they came. They had long memories and deep anger. They became the military backbone of the growing rebellion. Everywhere the Resolute went, hope followed. The humans were not conquerors. They did not ask for loyalty or tribute. They simply offered knowledge and encouragement and the simple truth that freedom was worth fighting for. Admiral tracked the Resolute's path with growing horror. Every system the humans touched erupted in violence. Slave factories were sabotaged. Imperial governors were assassinated. Warships were ambushed by vessels that suddenly carried weapons they had never seen before. They're not just running, realized. They're destroying us from within. He gathered the largest fleet in Imperial history. 500 warships, the best the Empire had. He positioned them at the border of space, the only route to neutral territory and eventual escape for the humans. The trap was set. The final battle was coming. On the Resolute, Jake received word of the fleet blocking their path. He gathered his crew one last time. This is it, he told them. One more fight, one more impossible battle, and then we go home. The crew of the Resolute, tired and wounded and pushed beyond all human limits, answered with a single voice. Yes, sir. They had come to this galaxy as explorers. They had become warriors, and now they would become legends. Part 5, The Return and the Promise. The border was a wall of steel and fire. Admiral had assembled 500 warships in a formation that stretched across light seconds of space. Every vessel was armed and ready. Every crew was determined to redeem the Empire's honor. The alien ship that had caused so much chaos would end here, at the edge of space, and its destruction would be a message to the entire galaxy. On the bridge of his flagship, watched the approach of the Resolute on his tactical display. The human ship was damaged. Its hull was from dozens of battles. It moved slower than before, its engines struggling with the accumulated wear of 3 weeks of constant flight. "They are alone," reported his tactical officer. "One ship against 500, this will be over quickly." Nodded, but he did not feel relief. He had underestimated these humans before. He would not make that mistake again. All ships maintain position. Do not break formation under any circumstances. We destroy them together. On the Resolute, Captain Jake stood at the center of his bridge for the last time. His uniform was torn. His face was marked with cuts and bruises that had no time to heal. He had not slept more than 2 hours in the past 3 days, but his eyes were clear and his voice was steady. "Report," he said. Lieutenant Commander Park looked up from the tactical station. 500 hostiles blocking our path. No gaps in their formation. Our weapons are at 30% capacity. Point defense is damaged but functional. Captain, by any reasonable assessment, we cannot win this fight." Jake smiled. It was a tired smile but genuine. "Since when have we done anything reasonable?" He activated the ship-wide intercom. "All hands, this is the captain. In a few minutes we will engage the enemy for the last time. I won't pretend the odds are good. They're not, but I want you to remember something. When we arrived in this galaxy, we were alone, lost, surrounded by an empire that wanted to enslave us. And we refused, we fought, we survived. And along the way, we showed an entire galaxy that tyranny can be beaten." He paused, looking at his crew on the bridge. At navigation, her hands steady on the controls. Hill standing beside him, loyal to the end. Cole at communications, her eyes red from lack of sleep but determined. Park at tactical, already selecting targets. And somewhere in engineering, Sam was probably holding the ship together with nothing but willpower and spare parts. "Whatever happens today," Jake continued, "we have already won. We proved that one ship, one crew, one people can stand against the darkness, and that message will echo across the stars long after we're gone. Now let's show these one more time what humans are made of." The Resolute accelerated toward the enemy fleet. 500 ships against one. It should have been suicide. But then the sensors detected something. Contact after contact, appearing from hidden positions throughout the system. Ships of every size and shape, vessels that carried the marks of the and a dozen other species. The rebellion had come. 100 rebel ships emerged from the shadow of a nearby moon. They were smaller than warships, built in secret factories from stolen materials. Their weapons were crude copies of human designs, kinetic launchers, and assembled by engineers who had learned from the Resolute's crew. They were not powerful enough to challenge the Empire alone. But they were not alone. Commander Hill stared at the tactical display in disbelief. "Captain, rebel ships, over 100 of them. They're moving to support us." Cole's voice cracked with emotion as she translated an incoming transmission. "They're saying the humans showed them the way. They're saying freedom is worth dying for. They're saying they will not let us face this enemy alone." Jake felt something he had not felt in weeks. Pride. Not in himself, but in the galaxy. In the beings who had spent centuries in chains and were now willing to fight. In the simple truth that courage was contagious. "All ships," he broadcast on an open channel. "This is Captain Jake of the USS Resolute. Form up on our wing. Today we show that their empire ends here." The battle that followed would be remembered for 1,000 years. The Resolute led the charge, its remaining weapons blazing. Kinetic missiles streaked toward the command ships while point defense guns created a shield of fire around the advancing fleet. The rebel ships followed, pouring their own weapons into the enemy formation. Admiral screamed orders, but his fleet was not prepared for this. They had expected one crippled human ship. They had found a revolution. The first line broke within minutes. Ships that tried to maintain formation were overwhelmed by concentrated fire. Ships that broke formation were picked off by rebel vessels that knew the terrain of this space better than any Imperial navigator. On the Resolute's bridge, chaos and coordination existed side by side, guided the ship through maneuvers that pushed the engines to their limits. Park selected targets with cold efficiency, making every remaining missile count. Hill coordinated with the rebel fleet, directing their attacks to maximum effect. And Jake stood at the center of it all, calling out orders with the calm certainty of a man who had already made peace with whatever came next. Target that dreadnought, concentrate fire on its engines, bring us around to bearing 375, all ships follow our lead. The flagship, Admiral's Eternal Dominion, became the focus of the combined assault. It was the largest ship in the fleet, the symbol of Imperial power. Its destruction would break the enemy's spirit completely. The Resolute fired its last kinetic missiles. The rebel ships added their own weapons. Hundreds of projectiles converged on a single target, overwhelming shields and armor through sheer volume. The Eternal Dominion died in a flash of white light. Admiral, who had never lost a battle in 300 years of service, did not survive. With their commander gone and their formation shattered, the fleet fell into chaos. Some ships tried to surrender, others fled into deep space. The battle was over. In the silence that followed, Captain Jake looked at the path ahead. Neutral space, safety, home. "Sam," he called down to engineering, "is the fold drive ready?" "Ready and waiting, Captain. One jump will take us to neutral territory. From there, we can make our way back to Earth." Jake nodded, but before he gave the order, he had one more thing to do. He opened a channel to every ship in the system, friend and former foe alike. "This is Captain Jake of the USS Resolute. We came to this galaxy by accident. We never wanted war. We never wanted conflict. But when you offered us slavery, we chose to fight. When you tried to destroy us, we survived. And along the way, we found allies who shared our belief that freedom is worth any price." He paused, looking at the stars on the somewhere out there was Earth, somewhere out there was home. "The Empire is broken today, not by us alone, but by the courage of every species that refused to accept tyranny. We are leaving now, going home, but I make you this promise. Humanity will return, not as conquerors, but as allies, as friends. We will help you rebuild. We will help you heal. And together, we will create a galaxy where no one is ever enslaved again." He cut the channel and turned to his crew. They were exhausted, wounded, pushed far beyond any limit they had ever imagined. But they were alive, and they were going home. He said, "Take us home." The fold drive activated. Space twisted around the Resolute for the last time. And then they were gone, leaving behind a galaxy that would never be the same. The Empire fell within a decade. Without their fleet, without their fear, they had nothing. The species they had enslaved rose up and tore down everything they had built. In its place, they created something new. A federation of free peoples, bound by trade and mutual respect instead of chains. And when human ships returned 10 years later, they found not enemies but friends. Monuments had been built to the Resolute on 100 worlds. Songs were sung about the human captain who had taught the galaxy to fight. The name Jake became a legend, a symbol of courage in the face of impossible odds. Humanity took its place among the stars, not as conquerors, but as partners in a new galactic order. They had arrived by accident. They had survived by will. And they had earned the respect of the entire galaxy through simple, stubborn refusal to give up. The crew of the Resolute were welcomed home as heroes. Parades filled the streets of every major city on Earth. Politicians made speeches. Historians wrote books, but for Jake and his crew, the greatest reward was simpler than any of that. They had gone into the darkness together, and together they had come home. Years later, when people asked Jake what lesson the Resolute's journey had taught him, he would smile and give the same answer every time. Humans are not special because we're strong. We're not special because we're smart. We're special because we don't know when to quit. We face the impossible and we keep going. We find darkness and we light a fire. That's who we are. That's what we do. And the universe is just going to have to get used to it. The stars awaited, and humanity was ready.